As a sort of very broad brushstroke, because alters were kind of created to take over when I could no longer deal with things, the problem now is that they will take over when they perceive that I can't deal with things, which means that we switch in the middle of doing something, which can be quite dangerous and is certainly quite disorientating. Partly because I literally don't know how to handle certain things like assertiveness and anger and the things that, I mean, a lot of people struggle with them, but rather than kind of not quite knowing how to deal with it, I actually switch into another personality.
Certain experiences that have happened that are stored within those boxes that can be seen in adult life as fears, as phobias. So you become absolutely terrified of certain places, certain types of buildings, certain locations, certain people, certain events, certain triggers. And when you see that trigger as an adult, it's like the lid is taken off the box and the person gets to look inside that box and see all that terror. But they can't remember exactly why they feel frightened, they just do feel frightened.
They are constantly looking for our abuser to come back, constantly, because they sort of don't believe that they've gone. So anything that kind of links in any way to our abuser will kind of have them all out looking. Basically, it's the interruption in narrative. Sort of, I'll start going out to Sainsbury's and suddenly one will see someone who reminds us of our abuser and suddenly it's 3 hours later and I'm not there. I find it very difficult to explain that to people because often I am quite functional. Often I'm totally capable of getting myself dressed and washed and in the car and going to Sainsbury's. And sometimes I'm really, really not. And the reasons that I'm not are very complicated.
In a way, it's a family. And I think my background in sort of child and adolescent and family work has been really useful with this because you could be dealing with a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old and a 50-year-old all in the same room, all at the same time, juggling for space. There's only one credit card, there's only one car, there's only one bed. So how do they work out who gets what and who gets to use what? Now, if you had a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old and you gave them a £10 note and you said, right, nip off to the shops and get what you like, it's not going to be an easy ride. One might want sweets and a sort of, a Disney video, and the other person might want the latest Halo game, and they're going to stand in the shop and have an argument about who gets to win. And that's what this is like. If the parts are aware that the other parts are there, then they can get cross with each other. Because one person might get to do all the nice stuff, another person just gets to hide under a desk and cry, and that doesn't seem fair. And why is it that I always feel pain and you don't feel pain? That's not fair. So there's going to be conflict and there's going to be arguments.
Every big decision is a really fine balancing act in terms of, like, sometimes it's a matter of telling them, as in, I am going. I'm sorry you're missing therapy, but I am going. Sometimes it's a matter of asking them, like, I would really like to do this and I know that you need a lot and how about we have an extra session or, I don't know, go to the zoo the next day, or sometimes it's a negotiation and sometimes it's just not possible. And the thing is, if they're not settled, I'm not going to be able to function. We still have trouble communicating. If we've got a lot of time, I can talk out loud or write notes and they will sometimes be able to hear that. But now I think I'm much more, I put them, I don't always manage it, but I sort of know that I've got to put them first. Because I've sort of learned the hard way that you don't actually get any life unless they're calm.
As I'm sitting here talking here, people are probably saying, well, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot wrong with this lady. Well, the reality is that on a day-to-day basis, there are many things that I find very difficult to do without the support. So from the time I get up in the morning, because of my dissociation and because of the way different parts of me, particularly child parts, have been traumatised, for instance, by being in a bathroom, I sometimes find it very, very hard even to get a shower. But I've found it possible to do if Jane is there on the other side of the door. It's just about coping with how the traumas affect me on a day-to-day life and how the dissociation affects me. Going out, if I'm having a very dissociative day, I may look on the outside like I'm coping okay, But actually there have been incidences when I've been walking around and walked out into traffic because I've been so dissociated I haven't noticed the traffic. To all outside appearances I might seem nothing wrong, but then I will suddenly put myself in danger. So having my support worker with me on those occasions, you know, literally pulling me back from putting myself under an ambulance on one occasion is crucial. I have certain dates in the year because of the type of abuse that I experienced, which involved ritualised abuse. There are some dates in the year that I can almost anticipate are always going to be difficult. And you know, when I talk about difficult, I become another part that has not yet learned to live in the life that we now live, and still thinks they need to be elsewhere. They need to be in places where we would be abused in the past, because they're still stuck in that time zone. And if I didn't have support at those times, if I didn't have my support worker to stay overnight, and this has happened, those parts might get control of the body and try and get us back to where they think we need to be. So we then end up kind of sort of travelling away, and I will come back into the body maybe 2-3 days later, and we could be kind of 100 miles away from where we're supposed to be, and I'll have no memory of having made that journey. We may have injuries on our body that I can't explain, but another part is kind of self-injured. It's so having a support worker to be able to kind of be there for me helps reduce all that risk.
I didn't have a sense of identity. Pre to working through just in the last 15, 18 years, if anybody had asked me my sense of identity, I was somebody's mum, somebody's daughter, somebody's wife. I had no sense of who I was. I had no idea. I wouldn't have known what it meant. I didn't grow up from within. We all learn from watching, but everything I've done is learning from watching. I didn't develop. We haven't done the stages of development, especially the emotional development. Obviously the physical development continued, but the emotional development. So in many ways to do with like relating to people and attaching to people and building on a relationship is a complete unknown minefield for me, because attaching to anybody meant death for me as a child. So we learnt to mentally survive without connecting with people any more than we actually had to just meet our everyday needs, being fed and clothed. So for me, the dissociation meant that I had no idea about forming deeper relationships. There's so many subtle aspects, and it's only with hindsight, because of course you only know how you are. You don't know how other people live or function. And so I could work 18 hours a day, sleep dead for 6 hours, get up straight out and work again, because that was my coping mechanism. If you like, I didn't self-harm in other ways, but I self-harmed the body by pushing it to its limits. We didn't do emotions, because if you showed an emotion, you were vulnerable. If you're taking the worst abuse you can possibly imagine, you have got to survive that somehow. And unfortunately, one of the first things that has to go is having emotions, because if the tiniest bit of emotion about being let down by somebody who you might have trusted and trying to make sense of a totally nonsensical situation, and you brought emotions into that, you wouldn't survive. So emotions have to go. But then you look around and you copy, and so you try and copy. If people are upset about something, you're finding you're copying rather than actually feeling. So because the whole structure of dissociation is to fit in and appear the same as everybody else, so you're frantically watching everybody to make sure you're copying. At 16, my abuse stopped, and but because we didn't develop from inside, what we did was update our system every 2 or 3 years. And this is all with hindsight. It's the brain is the most incredible thing. But sort of at 16, we were in a certain way, and at 18, it was like, we're not really fitting in here. So we created an 18-year-old Then we sort of got married, and so we created a wife and a mother. But it didn't come from within. It became more seamless as we got older and we learnt more skills as an adult. And because the abuse had stopped, we were able to focus totally out there. We didn't have any idea we'd been abused, none whatsoever. So we didn't have any of that affecting us emotionally, if you like, in a funny sort of way, which meant we could be like a robot out there. If we copied and copied and copied and did this correctly, then we functioned like a human being. It's only through therapy that I have the insight how robotic I was. You couldn't physically do what I used to fit into a day. If you had emotions and felt about things, there was no room for it at all.